first of all, thank you for joining us today. It's been a very interesting talk. It's been really great to hear all about crypto and fintech. Would you like to tell us briefly a bit about your journey to getting to where you are now?
Right, gosh, where do I start? Went to university, did a master's. I then started at Credit Suisse in research, and then from Credit Suisse to BNP Paribas, and I started and worked in the world of derivatives and financial engineering. And then I moved into creating different areas, different departments, different types of products. And then I set up a business before the term prop tech happened, which is a property internet business with an auctioning process. So I started it from scratch in Shoreditch, when Shoreditch wasn't what it is now today in London, and then sold the business. And then I joined the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, where I worked as a portfolio manager there in the asset liability management department. And then I went into a hedge fund, and where I was a partner in charge of derivatives, so I looked after all the hedging for the fund, interest rates, currency derivatives, and credit derivatives, and credit default swaps. And then I left to spend more time with my family, and I decided I wanted to become a teacher to support my kids. And I've been teaching since 2011. And I'm a curriculum director at the college where I am, and in charge of business, economics, politics, and sociology. But I've always had my fingers in lots of different pies throughout my career.
Nice, so very diverse background.
Very diverse, yes.
Yeah, and I see that you have a very deep interest in crypto then and fintech. Are you very passionate about it?
Yes, I mean, I particularly in fintechs, I think it's a huge opportunity for this country. We've got skills and talents from all over the world that come to London, and what makes the UK really special is that it's able to attract people from a wide range of varieties. So we're talking not just from different cultures, different religions, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations, genders, and so on. And also welcoming people with disabilities as well. And I think that's such an important element. In terms of cryptocurrencies, I think we're still in a very embryonic stage in terms of how it's going to be used, how it's going to be allocated. Is the currency truly free in the sense that does it really promote financial sovereignty for an individual, or is it a tool by the state to control and track people's financial decisions? And this is where I think one has to think very, very carefully what kind of path we choose to go down. In my opinion, cash is still going to be there. It may not be there to the same extent as in the past, but cash, whether it's physical or digital, which might be regulated by the Bank of England, I think that model is going to move forward quicker. While Bitcoin, for example, as a currency, the largest currency in the crypto area, I think it's about 40-50% of the market, still has a lot of challenges, and is still, in my opinion, more of a store of wealth, more of an asset to be purchased rather than a currency to buy and sell goods and services.
And do you think that this financial asset that you speak about, because you mentioned earlier during the panel that only 1,000 people own
40%, yeah. So that was an article I read from an asset manager, Amundi Asset Management, and they published this article in January. And I thought that was quite telling, because if we're looking at the size of the market for Bitcoin, I think it's around about $143 billion. And 1,000 people own 40% of that market.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. But more importantly is, if there are that few people controlling that size of a market, how do we know that the price at 10,000 is a real price?
And sorry, do you think it will be accessible to everyone eventually, or do you think it's going to stay like this in this uncertainty of what it's really like? Do you think there's a process that must be followed to allow everyone to have access? For example, break this barrier that we have in lack of information with the public, a trust problem, like we say. That
I think there needs to be trust in the system. There needs to be ways of regulating the system and the problem is that if you look at the whole premise of Bitcoin is that it should not be regulated, and that, regulation is a problem and not a solution. I sort of think about it, well, if you don't regulate the market, knowing that markets can fail, we've seen market failures in the health service, market failures in the education system. Markets are not inherently always producing positive outcomes. Markets can produce highly negative outcomes. Is it right, for example, so the key commodity that we look at today is not really about the currency, it's about information, it's about data, right? Is it right for, like Amazon knowing everything about you better than you know yourself? Is it right for Facebook, tracking, or Google tracking everything that you're doing, and you having no real control of what is being done, how it's being used? There's a reason why Android is free on your phone. Because people make that decision of trading information. So how do we value that information? How do we value that information flow? And this is the dichotomy when you're creating a cryptocurrency where you're saying that the individual is supreme. Well, an individual doesn't exist on an island. An individual is part of a community. And as a community, there are shared values which people agree to. And that is the fundamental basis of regulation, so that everybody has an equal platform. And how you could do that, I'm not sure that we have the answer yet. I'm sure there are people thinking about it and working on it, but I personally don't have an answer to that. Because if you look at nations where they don't have some kind of identity or something which binds them together, you tend to notice that a lot of these places tend to be more like failed states. And is that the way that we want to go? Do we want to live in a highly atomistic world where people don't have common shared values, where people think like paying tax is actually a good thing because we're helping ourselves, not just the community, but we're also indirectly helping ourselves through a collective insurance policy. And that's why, so to me, those sorts of issues are very, very important to think about.
So I guess we'll have to wait and see what other information rises and what's going to happen in future.
Yeah, pretty much so. I mean, that's what makes it such an interesting time.
Yeah.
You guys are going through one of the most interesting, one of the most fascinating things, and there's so many opportunities out there. But what I would like to say is, think about strategies, whether it's fintech, whatever career that you do, which could really help and push you forward. You're thinking about strategies for success, and you're developing passions of things that you really want to do, working hard for those things, having grit, being persistent. All of these kinds of shared values are so important. And don't necessarily think about this place is going to give me the most amount of money, this is where I should go. Go with your passion, go with what you enjoy doing, go with what you really want to do, and then just reach out for the stars to get it, and then just work hard at it. Again, realize nobody lives alone. Yeah, we all get better, we are all riding on other people's shoulders to reach successes. So never forget where you come from and what has happened and what's helped you to get to where you are, because there's so much out there for you.
I'd like to ask you about something that I found really interesting when you were speaking earlier, which is what you call the Kodak moment, about how when digital cameras came into place, Kodak just lost the market because they didn't know how to react to the technological advances that were going on. So how would you say that that banks, like traditional banks, can avoid having this Kodak moment where they are taken over by tech innovation, by crypto, by fintech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the key point is a bank needs to know, what is it actually doing? What service is it actually providing? What is it that the customers of the bank really want? What is it that the customers want but don't realize that they want? You know, and this is one of the key things. How do you develop that customer experience so that your customers keep coming back to you every day or once a week or whenever? And this is the problem, because if you have a huge infrastructure of branches, and if your infrastructure is based on pure deposits and, you know, borrowing short and lending long, you're not in a sustainable model, you know, particularly in a world of negative interest rates. You know, how does a bank survive when, you know, the government's borrowing 30 years at 1.2%, yeah, which is a negative interest rate for 30 years. So what, a bank can charge maybe, okay, like 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. How are they going to survive? How are they going to generate the income to pay for all those branches? And this is where, you know, companies like Monzo, Revolut, they're in my opinion making the right roads into moving into a space where customers may want to interact with them more directly. Yeah. Looking at, for example, AI, robotics, making decisions or enabling people to make decisions. So getting rid of the dead weight of, for example, legacy software architectures. You'll be amazed how many banks are still using softwares and patches on softwares which have been written in the 1970s. You know, this is how poor.
All this new information that everyone's using.
Exactly. So it's like, how do they manage and pivot towards a more online and understanding what their core business really is? You know, the core business may not be what they think it is, and that's I think is the key challenge to many banks.
Yeah, perhaps they're a bit too stuck in the past and trying to maintain their traditional core values rather than.
Well, it depends again. What, you know, at the end of the day, what is their core value? If their core value is to, you know, help and provide, you know, fantastic service to customers, then maybe they haven't been doing it for a long time. Course, yeah. So you have a certain bank, for example, which is still being taken to court over all these issues of PPI, you know, payment protection insurance. Yeah, how are they serving their core value to their customers? You have other banks who've been selling, you know, derivative products to clients who have no understanding of what these products do, have no understanding of what the upsides or the downsides are of these products. So how is that serving their core client? So it's understanding what the business model is of a bank, and also understanding that inherent in many banks, particularly banks which trade or have trading positions, the principal agent problem which inherently exists. Yeah. So if I'm a shareholder of a bank, yeah, am I earning as much money as an employee of the bank? And if I'm not earning, if all the time the profits that the bank is generating is all paid to the employees, why on earth am I a shareholder in the bank? You know, so those kinds of issues need to be looked at and addressed. So who is serving who, and to what extent? And also looking at what type of product, what are the range of products that customers really want? So looking at, you know, ethical investments, you know, looking at impact on responsible social responsibility. How is that feeding through into the values of not just the bank, but importantly, what is the values of the customers? Are they in line? And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities, and that's where it gives new entrants, you know, because they're starting from a clean slate, to embed that from day one.
So thinking about these opportunities, looking at the future with all these key changes, you mentioned earlier that these opportunities are going to be very wide in Africa and South Asia. Why in these places in particular rather than Europe?
Well, I'm not saying that there isn't. There are plenty of opportunities in Europe, but I'm thinking more in terms of impact on development. So you have millions of people around the world who have no access to financial services. And it's about how do we empower those people to gain access to get themselves out of poverty, or help to encourage them to get themselves out of poverty. And unless they have access to those resources, yeah, such as through, so I mentioned you have M-Pesa in Kenya. Yeah, you don't need to have a bank account, you just need to have 2 mobile phones, and money can exchange through effectively the mobile phone network. And I think that those kinds of technologies, it's very cheap, it's very simple. Even Mark Zuckerberg went over to Kenya to see how they're doing things with M-Pesa. But it's these kinds of things where costs and investments are relatively low, but impacts are massive. You know, it could make huge impacts on people's lives. And I think, and that's where I think, you know, fintech could really fly the flag in terms of creating a better, a fair society, which actually empowers people, not just from the developed world, but across the developing world as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us these couple of days. It's been great to get to know you and to learn from all your knowledge that you have.
Oh, no,
and all your
you.
past experience in the many sectors of business. So
Sure.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Thank you.